What we looked at, what we saw were the areas of waste. All those activities that you just described were called waste, were wasteful, they were non-value adding, and that's known as MUDA in the industry, and that's Dr. Koichi Ono, is part of the Toyota production system. Somebody.
I thought they were calling you mother.
That's where that came. That's where you came from. Yeah, think of it as mud. It's weighing us down. So, and we saw every single one of those in our process. Every single one. Inventory. We had the bottleneck. Now think about your process in a sales proposal. What might that be? What might be called bottlenecks in your business? And I know in a sales proposal it's underwriting. We have to wait for, like we had to wait for Lynette, we wait for them to do their review. It built up, she had a bunch of the balls building up their inventory waiting for somebody else to do their stuff. We saw motion. We saw going on. People, things getting in the way. What might be motion in your process that you're thinking of?
Well, the distance of travel, it was uncontrolled. It was all over the place.
Transportation, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Motion also, what about moving information? Again, get away from the ball, think about your process. What might be, motion might be people, and somebody said this already, moving information from form to form. Passing, handing off information from one to the other. That type of a thing.
You could just be waiting too for someone's signature on something, and they're not, you know, in companies, they've moved from the paper form sitting in someone's in tray to electronic forms. And if they're not checking their email, or if they're out of the country, or whatever the case is, it could sit there. So it's just a wait.
Yes,
sometimes.
exactly. We had the over-processing, rolling the ball, unrolling the ball multiple times. Was that really necessary? What about in your business? What might be an over-processing example?
Two people doing the same thing.
Exactly.
Right.
And neither, or one person, this is a common problem. Someone who wants, okay, doctor wants it done now, so he tells 3 people to do the same thing. And whoever gets it done first, he doesn't communicate, so the other 2 are wasting their time.
Exactly.
I'm not sure that's in any business.
Yes, yes.
Oh my gosh, that would.
How about the reverse of that? We're working with a group, they send out a blast of emails to all these people, do this. So you all sit here and nobody does it because you think you're doing it and you're doing it.
Somebody else is doing it.
Yeah, so nobody does it.
Right.
That's under processing.
Under process.
Or no processing.
Yeah. Okay.
Process stops.
We also, another thing we saw was defects. We had defects in our process. And in the case of errors, and again, retrieving that drop ball. What might be a defect in your business scenario? What about, for example, if we were missing information on the RFP document, well, it was a defect, the info was defect, we had to go back to the prospect, wasted time getting more info. Waiting, again, we already talked about waiting for bottlenecks, waiting for other people to do things. Yeah.
I have a horror story just to share with you.
Okay.
I never found out exactly why this horror story occurred. I was selling brake parts for a warehouse distributor of brake parts. There was a customer in Connecticut. He was ordering $5,000 a week in brake parts. He phoned in his order on Monday, and on Friday he called me and he said he hadn't gotten his order yet. Where's his order, you know? So the first thing I did was I went down to the warehouse, and there was his order sitting on a skid waiting to be shipped. And I asked the shipping manager about it, and he couldn't give me an answer. And probably what I should have done, because we had a policy that every order was going to go out within 24 hours. I couldn't figure out why this order was not shipped out within 24 hours. So maybe there was the process stopped at some point, and you know, who knows, the paperwork was lost. I mean,
So you had some kind of interference going on.
It's a real problem.
Yeah, you had a real motion problem there. It got
Yes.
stuck.
Yeah, I lost that customer. They couldn't help me.
And there's some other areas they also have added to this recently. Unused human capacity is another area of waste, and also unsafe conditions. Those are things that you look for, and those are all wasteful activities. All right, so we've identified many reasons why our process is slow. some of which I captured, some of which I had not. So, add yours in there, and they may be dropping the ball on these. Now, the next question is, how do you know which of these to address?
Which is the biggest?
Okay, excellent. And that is done by, a good tool to do that is using this Pareto analysis. Can anybody tell me what the Pareto principle is?
20% of the problems cause 80% of the cost.
Yeah, okay. It's like 20% of the people eat 80% of the food or whatever. So Pareto charts, the way the chart is laid out when you do a Pareto principle is you have on the side, you would have the number, you lay out your data in terms, you group it by categories of information, and you put the tallest bars on the left side, and it gradually goes down to the ones onto the
Where
right.
did you get that statistic?
From Graph Jam. All right, so in order to do the analysis of your Pareto analysis, again, you're going to need data once again. And again, a good way to collect your data, and these tools can be used at any point in time throughout your process as needed. A way to collect your data is a check sheet. And on the check sheet, you put the things the issues that you're looking at on the side, and then capture the time as you process each one across that, and you collect your data. But when you look at the data, again, it's hard to analyze when you get these big tables, especially with a lot of numbers. So the best way to do it then is to look at it graphically. So if we look at our chart, we can see time spent for each of those activities. So what does this chart tell you in terms of which ones we might want to tackle?
Yeah, can you go back to the previous screen, please?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess what I was looking for were totals vertically as well as horizontally to, further analyze this
Yeah, you can do,
whole thing
right.
problem. Yeah.
So why, in terms now, the decision we're trying to make is which issue to tackle.
Mhm.
How does the vertical answer that question? How would a total for each one answer that question of which issue?
I don't think so. I don't think
I
so.
know, because you're gonna look over here and say 250 bottleneck. Let me
Right.
look at 114 drops, and those are where I would go to.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
So yeah, if we were trying to look at which ball we wanted to tackle, then that would be useful information.
It
Right,
might
right,
be
right.
useful if you had different shifts and operators working and doing things, or different people working in an office at various hours. You might say, oh my gosh, ball 1, 2, and 3 were the 8 a.m. to 5, and the other ones were at midnight. Look at the large number, the total,
Exactly.
maybe. But in this case, you're looking for the time of the process.
So that gets back to the issue about measures. When you get your measures, you collect the measures, so they're there to tell you something. You've got to define what it is you're looking for, what you want that information to tell you, and that's the information you collect. If you start collecting all kind of other information, it's extraneous, it gets in the way, it interferes, unless it's...
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so having done that, now looking at this chart, what would this chart tell you in terms of what we might want to do?
Clear the bottlenecks, prevent the bottlenecks.
Yeah. We want to focus on maybe these two that are the biggest time drains.
And then there's an interesting question: why are the bottlenecks and drops so much higher than the questions, the clutter, and the interruptions, measures?
I'll tell you why, because that's the way it's always been done.
Excellent. And these are all excellent questions that you, depending upon what your objective is in the improvement opportunity, is that valuable? Is it costing you? These are all things you take into consideration. Is it going to cost you more to collect that information and analyze it than it's going to be worth in terms of the improvement that you do?
Exactly.